people plugging in. Welcome back.
Episode 3.
So episode 3, I think today we're going to talk about the thing that we have been focusing on for not just the last week, but we've been really on the tail end of it for the last week. And we've been really honing in on SOPs, standard operating procedures.
So much. I think we're at the tail end. I know there's always more work to be done.
Yeah.
And you're right. We've always been working on SOPs, whether we called it that or not. I mean, I think we've known it, but now that the team is growing, I think I do believe we 4x or quadrupled the team in the last 10 months, the full company alone. But the marketing team, we added, I think we're at 15 new people in just the last month.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So that's a lot of new people that if you don't have a standard operating procedure for, it could be utter chaos. And I, like Rebecca said, we've always had SOPs, but there's always room for improvement. And I think both our, the current mentorship program that we are in with the Vayner team at Sasha Media, at Sasha Group, and our own internal realizations, we've realized that, right, just like communication, things can always be clearer and you cannot over communicate. So the SOPs that we've been putting in place have been really, really cool, and getting everyone's input has been super important with just, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like you got to understand that not everyone comes in at the same level. So the SOP has to be for people that don't have all the experience and have made all the mistakes that you've made and all of that. And you have to pretend, it's like SOPs for dummies, right? Like you have to pretend like no one knows what you're talking about, kindergarten level, and then build it up from there so that there is no misunderstanding.
Yeah. I like to think of it like playing to the lowest common denominator, not meaning that someone is coming in stupid by any stretch of the imagination or means, right? But everybody not knowing how we work, there's going to be an ignorance, and there's nothing wrong with that. So we need to make sure that people do know our systems coming in. And like you said, we need to be super clear on expectations. I don't believe you're ever going to lose a client or a team member, barring some exceptions, by uber communicating with them. And so if we uber communicate and are super detailed, which is really what we're doing, right? I mean, like we said, we had the SOPs, but now we're going back and with a fine tooth comb, as we like to say, we're fine toothing it. We're going through what we currently have and making sure that they're up to date with the growth and the changes that we're going through, with the recommendations we're getting from Sasha Group and Gary V's team, and making sure that everything aligns and it speaks to each other well, right?
Well, actually, now that you're talking about it, I've realized why the change. We've always had SOPs, and we had it for the time that the company was a certain size, right? So if I think back to 4 or 5 years ago, I'm like, okay, we did this every Sunday, right? Because there's just 4 of us. So every Sunday at 8:00, we'd meet and, we'd brainstorm for the ideas for certain clients. We'd make sure that XYZ was in place, every Monday or every Friday. We'd have smaller meetings with the video production team at that time, et cetera. But when the company grows, yes, you need more detailed standard operating procedures, et cetera. But the component that has been the most prominent in the last 2 years has been the virtual meetings, right? Like you cannot just walk over to somebody's desk and tell them how we do something. There's been part of the onboarding process that I have, or that we have with employees when I meet with them, is making sure that they know the tips and tricks of where to find information on a client that they need. I never want anyone's job to be held up, or with a task that they need to accomplish that day to be held up by just needing to, or waiting is my least favorite word, for somebody else or on somebody else for information. You do not want to wait on somebody else for information. You want to be self-reliant. And so, I mean, that's super important, taking into account what needs to be in the standard operating procedure, right?
Yeah, exactly. And back to what we were saying just now earlier too, people coming in, they're not going to know how to find things or where to find things because they're new to the role itself. They might have great experience when it comes to digital marketing or maybe their specific specialization, but our way of working and how we've been changing has to be documented, has to be written down, and then giving that to them as a guide. I believe structure will set you free to create and ideate, and knowing the expectations means you know exactly how much you can go above and beyond, and what's expected of you will give you a confidence when you're doing your work, and you know that freedom, like I said. But when people are coming in, you know, it could be a free for all. It would be utter chaos, and and rightly so, if they don't know what they should be doing on a daily basis. Again, not because people are stupid, and that's not what the lowest common denominator means. I believe that you play to the lowest common denominator, but you assume that everybody is of the highest intelligence so that you can have those higher level thinking meetings and brainstormings and interactions with people and give people the same level of respect, but not assuming that they're going to come in knowing what is expected of them. We all know what happens when you assume. I won't go any further than that, but that, you know, that is part of expectations, right? People can't assume one way or the other. It has to be spelled out. And we always say that we're not super corporate, which I don't believe we are. And I know we're not, but that said, there still has to be that structure, which I think humans, we need anyway as humans. And
percent. Yeah. I forgot who we were talking to, but they were like, oh, like I need an SOP for my life. And I'm like, yeah, like SOPs for your life. It's technically, it's what you do. It's routine. It's, you know, what days do you go to the gym? What do you have for breakfast every day? What time, you know, all those things, those are standard. Think about it. Standard operating procedures is how you operate your life, right? Like even think about the standards that you have for, whether you commit to an event that you're going to go to or not, right? Who's going to be there? What time is it? Do I have anything else going on that day? They're questions that you ask yourself to see if you even want to attend the event, right? So going back to the standard operating procedures internally or for a company, you know, it's all got to be a place that you can end up being accountable to. That's I think a huge keyword right there is what is the standard that I can hold myself accountable to, that I can, you know, move forward or improve, right? SOPs can always be improved. There's not, I think at FMO Media, or I know at FMO Media, we're always looking to improve, and we don't just implement change overnight. But if there's a better way to do something more efficient, faster, like let's do it. Let's talk about it and let's implement it as soon as possible. Why are we going to wait to evolve, you know?
For sure, 110%. And, you know, like you said, there's always room for improvement in the SOP. Certainly not perfect. And that's why we need all of our team members' feedback and input, because they're the boots on the ground executing, right? And ideating. It's not, all the strategy is not coming from us, nor should it come from us. And so to empower them, which is one of our values, as well as educate and coach and train them along the way, we have to pull them into that process so that they have that buy-in. Actually, you and I were on a training, a Dale Carnegie training about buy-in and team members. We call them team members. We don't like the word employees, but you know, in the training, it was that the employee needs to have that buy-in and give their input and engage, because when they do, then they're going to feel more valued. They're going to produce better work, and overall the company is going to grow better too. And that's me paraphrasing the quote, but I think the point is valid, and we certainly see that. And that's something that we've already taken to heart as well. And when you guys founded FMO, that was very much a part of our values to begin with. So that's not something new that we've just begun. but we see how valuable it is continuously over time.
Yeah, it's so funny too. I'm thinking about when we work with, we work with a lot of different clients, and we've worked with some new businesses, and it's just interesting to see when we've had businesses where they had their SOPs in place before they started the business. And I would say that's because they had experience in the industry. And then they worked with somebody else and then went out and started their own business. And so they kind of knew what they had to have in place. And it's great when we're working with them marketing wise, because they already have their stuff together internally. They know what they're doing. They know, and they're using FMO Media to then move their company forward. And then we have some newer clients sometimes that they're newer businesses and they don't have SOPs in place. And it's kind of cool to, that's part of our consulting program, where we are able to then guide them on those standard operating procedures. And obviously they can't copy us exactly because, it's not, they don't have the same type of company. But it's really great to at least have a starting point. These days, yes, you can Google anything, but everything without context is difficult to understand. So being able to provide someone with the context as to why we have this procedure, why we are using this platform, for XYZ, allows them to make a decision quicker that will move their companies forward. And ultimately, that's what we want to do. We want to help people grow their businesses, right? And so that's just another way that we do it. But why don't we talk a little bit about the types of SOPs? Because this just came across my mind, thinking that we are a 360 marketing company. We do almost everything, right? And we have incredible brains that lead each department and do the research on what's trending and what's new and the training and all of that. But to put all that together has been a lot of work, right? Because you kind of, I think we kind of put together the client services aspect because that's what we were dealing with the most, right?
Yeah. For us, the types, to make it simple, comes down to individual SOPs for the role itself, and then the team or department SOP. What does the unit need to do? And then you need the individual SOPs to make sure that, again, all the right people are talking and responsible for their area of management or roster, if you will, because if everybody's responsible, then nobody's responsible, right? And we all share the value of responsibility and ownership, but you still have to have your section, your delegation, your castle to take ownership of, right? And then we also have our internal SOPs that we're constantly working on. We had a discussion about one earlier today, which comes about from growing the teams and putting new leadership in place and needing to make sure that the structure that we have is elevated as we grow and as we build the scope of that. So when it comes to client services, one of the thoughts that struck me with that team is that they're very much like a train station. They're like Grand Central Terminal, and all of the platforms that all the trains need to go to are the different services for our clients. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have a platform conductor making sure that those trains take off on time and that the passengers, i.e. our clients, get the timetables and know what's expected, then you're going to have sheer and utter chaos. People aren't going to get to where they need to be. You're going to have angry passengers, clients, the team leads that are driving the train and trying to move them forward are going to get stuck at the station, or they get stuck on the tracks if we don't have the right communication systems in place as well. And client services is that huge beast that is responsible for sending the trains off and then sending them back in to receive the information and to carry the passengers. So I think that's been the one that's needed the most growth and needed the most structure. And I know, Mel, you've heard me say a lot that as we grow, we still have to keep the system simple so that it's not overly complicated. Things can't fall through the cracks, and we're not having too many cooks in the kitchen, to use other metaphors. But you know, I think this is still going to be the most complex of all of it, right? Because so many different team members have to be communicated with. Account managers have to be communicating back. And yeah, it's been the most important one as we add to the team new roles that are responsible for the moving parts.
Yeah. And so it's funny, you've been talking about this train station analogy for a while, and I never got a chance to hear the full part. I don't think you realized that. I think you were telling it to other people. I never got a chance to hear it. So this is my first time hearing that analogy. And I'm like, wow, this is spot on how, you know, things move, at least in our company. I'm positive that it's very similar in other companies too. There's always going to be different departments, and communication is just so important. But yeah, I really like your analogy. And I think the other aspect, I know you were going towards the food, but let's stick to the train station.
I both like food and snacking, so sometimes
yeah. I mean, it's just, I'm like, how do I explain this? We're gonna have to cut this part.
Well, here, you know, in that sense, we've always known that client services, I think we've always known that it had to grow and it was going to evolve. And we knew when we were forming the first onboarding specialist team, because it's now a legitimate team. It used to be you and Ariella, and then it was me and Ariella. And I like to think that the three of us were the OGs of launching clients and launch specialization. But now it really is its actual team. And we knew when we were forming the first team that there was going to need to be a second team down the road. And so now we're forming that second team, and that's in the works. But as we've been going through this, we've also been elevating and building out the scope for smaller teams as well. So that's what you've been working on, especially with the web team.
Yeah, actually. And it's funny. That's what I was going to say before too, is that about 90%, I would say, of the people that are moving up into different management positions, different leadership positions, they all started as account managers. Rebecca started as an account manager, and I started as an account manager, because it's really super important for us for people to have the boots on the ground, to know what it's like, because you can't just come in and tell someone what to do without actually experiencing what it's like to be in there. I myself, I talk about this all the time, right? I handled 30 accounts at one point. How did I do it? Well, we offered much less services at that point. So that's, that's given, it's true. However, it was because, and at the same time, I also own the company. So I was going to work no matter, how hard I had to, but it was a great way to start the company, to figure out the things that we needed to do. And of course I didn't manage them by myself. I did the social media aspect, and obviously my partners helped with video and coordinating different things that we needed for clients, et cetera. But essentially now that position has evolved, and it's been made better by each person. So when an account manager started, even a year ago, they went ahead and, did what they had to do in that position. We realized things that could be better. They improved the standard operating procedure for it. And then if they're now leading teams, if they're one of our community managers that are managing different account managers, they are now managing people, not tasks necessarily, or not the work. And they know from the experience what the work is, so that they can lead people. And so that's how I think everything needs to be. And I love having people that have the experience from, I hate to call it entry level, but I guess the most entry level type of work that there could be, right? At our company, at least. So I really like that.
I always like the mindset that you shouldn't delegate something you're not willing to do yourself. Now, there's a little bit of a grain of salt with that because I'm not an SEO strategist. So I can delegate something to our SEO strategist that I probably can't do, but there has to be I think the mindset still of, we'll figure this out together. It might not be my specialty, but I'm going to delegate something to you and we're going to hold each other accountable for this and work on this together. And that's what's so great about you, Mel, and all the rest of ownership, that we figure things out together. Actually, we just had a conversation with an up and coming community manager about how, as a manager, you need to keep the conversation, the communication coming upstream so that we can help bring more questions to us. I still, and we all do, love when people bring solutions to the table rather than just problems, right? Yeah. Because we don't always have the answer, but coming to us with the challenges and potential solutions so that we can figure it out as a group. So that it isn't just, a boss sitting high up on a boss chair saying, do this, do that, do the other, right? There can still be the direction and the molding and the shaping, which is part of being a leader, but being in service leadership, we're right alongside everybody, helping and guiding and pulling from their expertise and their know-how. But you really do have to experience it to know and to improve and to make it better for the next person, right? That's actually, I read recently, that's the definition of luck. Luck is not something that just magically happens to you. Luck is really the result of another person coming before you and paving a better way for you. And then I would take it a step further and say, well, now you need to pave a better way for the next person coming after you.
Yeah. Pay it forward, right? You always have to think of that, pay it forward. And again, it all stems from leadership, from who's leading the company. And what's interesting is that I think at other companies that I've worked with before, the buck stops somewhere, right? So it's like, but the buck doesn't stop at our CEO, Ace. Ace is constantly getting outside information because he admits himself that he doesn't know it all. And I think that's a great attitude to have always for the rest of your life. You're always learning. And we even get mentorship from an outside company as well. So it's really hard to imagine a limit for FMO, and a limit for people that work with us. A year ago today, there were not half the positions, but yeah, maybe half the positions that we have now weren't even technically created. People were doing the work because it needed to get done. But there was maybe not the right title for it yet. And so part of those titles came with some of our, some of the mentorship that we do have. So it's been really cool to see it grow in that way. And I'm like, I can't even imagine where we're going to be in a year.
And that's what I stress whenever I'm on recruitment calls with anyone that we're looking to hire. You're coming into it ever evolving, changing company. We're always going to be growing. And for some people, they might not want that. That might not be the kind of work style that they want. And that's okay. No harm, no foul, right? We want it to be a good fit for everybody. But knowing that you're never going to stagnate here at FMO, nothing is ever going to feel stale. And like you said earlier, we're always looking to improve. We'll make a quick decision as fast as we can. If we can execute on it quickly, we don't want to rush. We still think through something, but if it makes sense to do it fast, we will. And being prepared to come into that environment, it takes a certain kind of person. Otherwise you might feel like, I imagine people could come in and think, oh, this is just a startup. Everything's changing on a dime. And that's not the case. Nothing is changing on a dime. Everything is very carefully planned, thought out. Sunday meetings still happen, right? We're still planning the week ahead and projections ahead. But we do it with speed and alacrity, right? There's no slowness here. It's paced, but it's speedy.
I think that generally speaking, people just aren't used to that from a company. And so someone can very easily come into FMO Media and be maybe a little bit intimidated, but at the same time, I think that is agency life. Think about how quickly social media and their algorithms and everything changes. Like, oh, I have to do reels, and now I have to dance on TikTok, and I have to do trending audios, and news, it's actually original audio that's trending. So switch it up. So that is part of the digital marketing life. Things are always changing and evolving. And to be part of a company that is going to be, the lead nationwide in digital marketing services for professional services, we have to evolve with the times. We have to be up and coming, and we have to work quickly. And I know we might be coming up on our time here, but I wanted to ask you, Rebecca, what would be, if somebody's listening to this, whether they're an account manager or they have their own, digital marketing company on a smaller or larger scale, going back to the SOPs, what do you think what's your biggest tip as far as either creating an SOP or implementing it?
Well, it's actually a tip that you talk a lot about, not analyzing while you're creating. And I always say too, you can't create in chaos. So they too might feel a little contradictory as well, but put all of your ideas onto paper and get insight from the team as well. We had the benefit of a team deck presentation, quarterly presentation recently, where they gave us their feedback for what they needed for the team, which was great insight. So I think you need to get insight and write it all down and take it in phases too. What's big picture? What's the big picture goal that we're going for, right? Because it's challenging for someone in their maybe small domain kingdom platform. Go back to the train station, right? If you're on one train station platform, you might not understand exactly how you fit into the bigger picture. So you do have to have someone who understands the bigger picture from the train grand station, right? The grand terminal. And so you have to keep in mind, what's that pathway? What's the journey back and forth? And then on a smaller level, what does this role need to succeed? What expectations should they have? And what's that sort of Uber communication that you can have to convey that with them? What are the details of the role itself, so that they have a clear path to communicate with the rest of the stations, if you will? And then how are you delivering that information? What's the why behind it? You always go back to that too, right? What's the why? And then yeah, it always comes back to the why, but the why is big picture as well as small picture, right? And I think you have to take it from two different lenses, two different viewpoints, because if you just focus on the small picture, which is why you do need to gain insight from the team, but you can't rely solely or expect an individual team member to put together their own SOP solely. We had several team members put the first draft together, and now it takes fitting it in the puzzle piece, if you will, into the bigger picture, the bigger puzzle, the bigger narrative. So different lenses, big and small, and then making sure that you're not trying to overanalyze everything while you're data dumping and getting everything possible that you can think of, exhausting all of the resources you have, as well. Googling, I work smarter and harder. We're all working hard. I don't want to downplay that by saying not working hard, but work smarter at the same time so that you can be more productive in it.
100%. I think that's the only way you can level up. I want to point out I think one of the biggest points you made. Yes, going back to the why, it's always my original thought, but not original, Simon Sinek. But beyond that, involving the team members that are boots on the ground now. Because if you just give someone an SOP and you're like, follow this, and they're like, great, now this is stuff that I have to do for my job. And it's just mundane. You need their input in order to be able to, critically think and get them excited to do the work, to do the mundane tasks, the brushing of the teeth, right? That leads to no cavities, to do the daily mundane tasks that it takes to manage an account, to move a department forward, etc. So I think we will probably wrap it on that, but get those standard operating procedures for your life, for your work, for your life's work, for all of those things done. It's only going to help move you forward in general. So
for sure. That's what Kuma says anyway.
Yeah, Kuma.
You know, we'll leave with this too, because we were talking about this earlier this week with Ace and the rest of the team. It's consistency, right? It's Kaizen, constant, steady improvement. Our steady just happens to be speedy. So constant, speedy improvement. but we're on the ride. We're on the train. So
you should have came with train hats or done the immersive experience in a train platform.
Shoot.
The next one.
That's next time. Yeah, next time we'll be on a train together, utilizing Zoom's cool tech. But thank you guys for plugging in. We'll have a post put some cool features on this. We'll see what yeah.
Get the train going through.
All right. Well, this podcast is leaving the station, or maybe it's coming back. I don't know. We'll iron out that analogy. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you later.
Toot toot.